Political diplomacy is needed between the continent's electoral bodies and their respective governments to ensure that the guidelines and principles for safeguarding electoral integrity in the digital age are implemented.
This is according to IEC CEO Simon Mbolo, who's at a two-day validation workshop in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
15 election management bodies have gathered at the African Union's headquarters to draft rules for the use of digital and social media in elections in Africa.
Well, it's been quite an eventful and interesting day here in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, at the AU's headquarters, and this as 15 electoral management bodies across the African continent have, converged to actually discuss the guidelines and some of the principles to safeguarding the electoral integrity in a digital age, and also those digital and social media elections in Africa. But joining me now is Dr. Nomsa Masuku, who is a commissioner with the IEC, and of course she'll just wrap up today's inputs from the various EMBs across the country. Dr. Masuku, thank you so much for joining us on SABC News. I mean, today was very enlightful. The inputs that we had from various countries was also very interesting. But from a South African point of view, from somebody who's watching us right now and says, why is this dialogue so important, and why is it important for South Africa to actually spearhead this process?
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity. The Electoral Commission of South Africa carries a few hats at this particular point in time. First of all, we sit in the regional body that is called the Electoral Commissions Forum of SADC. We sit as the vice chairperson of the executive committee, but more importantly, at a global stage, we sit as the president of the Association of World Electoral Bodies. So for South Africa, this is an opportune time. But from a South African perspective, we started our journey with using the benefit of social media as long ago as 2013, as we were preparing for the 2014 elections. And we started raw. We didn't have a lot to learn from. And we went into a journey. We learned a couple of lessons, that it is not possible to understand and harness this force without forming solid relationships. And so this really started from that realization. We held a conference in Cape Town where we talked about the impact of social media on elections. And as you might recall, as you cover elections quite extensively, it is that it has a positive effect, but it also has a very chilling effect on elections. And we watched the world as the world was trying to figure out, looking at the threat of particularly disinformation on the integrity of elections. So that is where we come from as South Africa. Yes.
I think also talking about the threats, and one of the inputs that were glaring to me earlier on was the connection that social media had with the coups that we've seen on the African continent. I mean, we've got, I think, 8 coups in the past 3 years, and also violence post the election. So if maybe, for example, if I don't like electoral outcomes of a certain election, I'll head to the streets and voice, my frustration.
Yes. I think this is a good moment to talk about the value of any country investing in an election management body, whatever shape and form it is, because you've got many options on the table. It is that if the electoral management body gets things wrong, you can literally have war the following day, and this is not an exaggeration. And those cases that we're talking about of the coups that have happened, of violence that has happened, it is when the country does not fully embrace the work of an electoral management bodies. By the way, not all countries have such a unifying body as an election management body. The USA is one case in point, where it has a multitude of institutions that run elections. But I think the bottom line is that it is important when you run elections to have certain standards. And one of the standards that we hold very dear in South Africa is transparency. and you always get better at the job. So you think you've done well in the last election, but every single election brings its own dynamic, and it is a very different dynamic, its own challenges. And so what we're trying to do in South Africa is to take those learnings, take them to the SADC region, take them to the rest of the continent. We have been instrumental in forming, for example, guidelines for elections and democracy on the continent. And it is not quite surprising that we are also pioneering this journey about what it is that we do with social media.
And talking about pioneering the journey, I mean, it was interesting to hear how, they actually hold the IEC in high regard. I mean, it's quite interesting that you point out that South Africa is the chair of AWEB, and you're also the secretariat of the EA. I hope I got that right. What lessons can other electoral management bodies actually learn from South Africa?
I think other EMBs, what they can learn is only to wish for the kind of networks that are available to us within South Africa. Because the election management body is only one cog in a very complex machinery that needs to work together. So what have we got going for us in South Africa? We have enabling laws. We've got a constitution that allows us to do that. The players in the game also let us do our job. I know South Africans find it hard to believe, but they actually do. There are very few things that sometimes we feel like our politicians agree on, but if there's something that they do really agree on, is to leave the Electoral Commission to do its job as best as you can. And any time that we make a ruling, sometimes it feels like, well, on your case, and the following day it's somebody else. So what South Africa has going, it is that you nurture relationships, you try every single day to be as transparent even when it hurts. So when something goes wrong, you are the first one to admit this is what you have done and this is the mitigation that you have. But also you're open to feedback that sometimes does not land quite well, but you have to be mature enough to take that feedback and make it improve your practice. That's what we've got in South Africa, and that is what we wish the rest of the continent to have an engaging relationship with even the legislature. We have an enabling legislature in South Africa. Also, when laws are made, the relationship that we have with those that make the laws is such that it is a partnership, and we have mutual respect for each other. We also mutually respect our own lanes, as we would say in South Africa. So they keep to the lane, we keep to our lane, but together we form something good. So that is really what we have in South Africa. It's a culture. What we have to offer the continent is not only just a culture, but a set of values that I think we have both inherited and have a duty to carry on.